Hi, I'm Ken Johnson. I'm a horticulture educator with the University of Illinois Extension, and today I want to talk to you about growing garlic. Garlic is a rather popular herb that's used in a wide variety of different cuisines and dishes. It is a relatively easy plant to grow, and it doesn't have very many pest problems. When we're planting garlic, the ideal time to plant this is in the fall. In order to really produce properly and get nice sized bulbs and cloves on garlic, it needs a chilling period in order to get that. So typically when we're planting garlic, we want to do this in the fall. A lot of times we're going to do this about 6 to 8 weeks before the ground is expected to freeze. And here in Illinois, that's about October. So we'll plant this in October. It'll start to grow some roots, send out some shoots, and then when the ground freezes, it'll kind of stop growing and then resume growth in the spring. So when it comes to finding a place to plant your garlic, you want to look for somewhere that's got well-drained soils that are in full sun. Garlic also likes soils that are relatively high in organic matter. So if you don't have a soil that has high organic content, you may want to incorporate some compost or well-rotted manure into that soil before you plant. So when it comes to growing garlic, there's really two different types of garlic we can grow. First, we've got our hardneck garlic. And this is called hardneck because it has a scape running through the center of that bulb. And this is just the flower stalk that that bulb is going to send out during the growing season. Hardneck garlic is relatively cold hardy, so this is probably the best bet when it comes to growing garlic here in Illinois. It also peels relatively easy. One of the drawbacks to hardneck garlic is it doesn't store quite as long. The second type of garlic we have is softneck garlic. This is called softneck garlic because it doesn't have that scape running through the center of the bulb there. Softneck garlic stores for a relatively long period of time. This is the type of garlic you're going to find in a grocery store. One of the drawbacks to this, though, is that it does not peel all that easily, or it doesn't peel as easily compared to hardneck garlic. There is a kind of a third type of garlic out there, that's elephant garlic. This is not actually a true garlic, but it is a type of leek that has a mild kind of garlic flavor to it. So once you have your soils ready to go, it's time to start breaking up your bulbs to plant your garlic. When you're breaking up your bulbs, you want to look for the largest cloves. These are going to give you the best yields. If you find any cloves that are shriveled up or diseased, dispose of these, and any smaller cloves that you have, you can use those in the kitchen to cook with, or if you have some extra area, you can plant those. But again, the bigger the clove, the better the bulb you're going to get and the better yields you're going to have. So when it comes to planting your garlic, you want to make sure you're planting it the proper way. At the base here, you can see this is flat area. This is the root plate, so this is going to go down. On the other end is pointed, and this is the part that's going to go up. When we're planting them, we want to put them about 4 to 5 inches apart, and we want to have them about 1 to 2 inches deep. All right, so once you have your garlic planted, it's a good idea to add about a 4 to 6 inch layer of mulch over them. This mulch is going to help minimize some of the soil temperature fluctuations we can get during the winter, and it's also going to help reduce weed competition come spring. Garlic is not very competitive when it comes to weeds, so this mulch layer should hopefully help you get some better yields on your garlic. Once you have that mulch layer put down, you can sit back, relax, and then come spring, you should have some shoots emerging from the ground. Then come summer, you can go and harvest your garlic. Thanks for watching, and keep on growing.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Facebook Live with the Horticulturists. We are the Horticulturists here to answer your gardening questions, and glad to be back on today to chat specifically about bulbs and pumpkins, which, of course, for fall is a very timely gardening topic. My name is Candace Hart. I'm the State Master Gardener Specialist for U of I Extension, and I'm based here in Bloomington and love to chat about all things flowers, annuals, perennials, cut flowers, including bulbs. So happy to touch on that today, but luckily we have some other horticulturists who like to chat about other topics of gardening. So Kelly, you want to introduce yourself?
Hi, everyone. My name is Kelly. I'm a horticulture educator based out of Bloomington. If you've heard me before, I like talking about everything. And I am an expert on everything. Well,
of course,
not really. All of us horticulture educators feel like we're like, we have this broad range of knowledge. We know a little bit about multiple things. And so I do love talking about insects, whether we're killing them, saving them, or celebrating them. That's my thing.
And I'm Ryan Pancaw, a horticulture educator out of Champaign. And so I guess my area of expertise probably is trees and shrubs. Woody plants are kind of where I've got formal training, the most experience, but I'm also a big natives person. And also, Kelly, you didn't mention this, you're also a vegetable gardener. Both of us like to grow a lot of vegetables in the home garden kind of setting. So love to talk about all those things and anything else horticulture related.
My cilantro I'm growing cilantro and beet greens and spinach right now. I had some downy mildew on my basil this year, so I had to reseed. So that's what I'm enjoying right now. Man, the cilantro is amazing.
Good time of year.
Yeah. I had some good cilantro in spring that's, obviously done now. I don't know. My vegetable garden is kind of waning at this point. I didn't do much of a fall planting, but I am getting prepped for, I think I just got shipping confirmation on garlic for a fall planting. So I didn't do that last year, and I felt like I just really missed something. So, that's actually a bulb,
it is
that you can plant and get an edible product out of.
Nice.
I have garlic bulbs right here.
Well, do you want to kick off by talking about that? So if you guys have questions, start adding those into the comment box. I see one that's come through already, and we'll address those today, whether it's about bulbs, whether it's about fall planting, anything, pumpkins. We're happy to answer that and any gardening questions, but we're going to focus, I think, kind of first on the bulb aspect of things. So yeah, if you guys joined early, we had that great video from Ken that was talking about garlic. So Ryan, why don't you tell us, or Kelly, kind of what's your plan? When are you going to plant those?
Sure. Well, I can kind of tell you how I've done it in the past. And, I think the recommendation is probably that it's about 4 to 6 weeks before your frost date, you get them in. So you don't want to get a lot of, want that bulb to have time to kind of start to do something, but you don't want to get a lot of top growth, where if you planted too early, you would get a lot of top growth. And then when it gets, growth above the ground, then when it gets cold, it's going to freeze and kill that back. And you waste some of the bulb's energy, but you want it to get kind of established a little bit. And then whatever did come up, usually just a little tiny bit, gets knocked back for the winter, but then it's set to grow in the springtime. So a couple different ways you can actually arrange your planting. I guess to start from the very scratch, and I guess I didn't see Ken's video, so I hope we're not repeating a lot of stuff.
Hey, you're good.
What Ken went through, but essentially, Kelly held up, garlic bulbs, which are kind of a collection of individual cloves. If you fix food with garlic, you're constantly breaking those apart and getting down to the individual cloves. So you can plant each one of those cloves, and then it grows into a bulb like that by about June or so is when I'm into June, maybe is when I'm harvesting my garlic usually. So it's pretty simple. You don't want to break the bulbs apart before the day you're going to plant, but break them apart into individual cloves. And then there's a couple different ways you can plant, either as rows. And that's how I usually do it, kind of as rows about 4 to 6 inches apart in a little shallow kind of trench is how I set up my planting. Or you can just plant them kind of 4 to 6 inches apart all over the place. And I've seen that as a really effective, kind of looks neat too, as a little patch of garlic. I like the rows so I can just kind of very clearly see where things are. I can weed between them, kind of control weeds in between my rows as opposed to having this patch of a thing. So that's just my preference. I don't know if either way is more or less productive, but I will say, over the years, as far as productive vegetable crops go, we've really had a lot of luck with garlic, and I don't know that it has anything to do with anything special we've done in growing garlic. We're very basic, probably not advanced garlic growers, but I feel like we've got enough to really almost supply ourselves for the year. If we put in enough in the fall, and there's another storage aspect of harvesting garlic and all that. But anyway, I highly recommend it. It's just a fun time of year to have. I again kind of didn't get a fall planting in of any of the greens or the things, cool season crops that we can plant. And so it's just nice at the end of the year, you go out, you kind of clean up your garden beds for the year, and you open one up to then put garlic in. And it feels good to have that tucked away for the winter and ready to go in spring.
Yeah. Aaron asked, do you have to peel the cloves before you plant them?
No, I've done it both ways. I mean, it works, but it's a lot of extra work. And in my experience, it does not pay to peel those little guys. Like I just plant them with the papery covering on them. So
cool. Okay. Awesome.
You do want to plant them right side up. I mean, and you can kind of tell as they come off the clove. I've heard folks say that doesn't matter as much either, but I always kind of, I don't know if I'm a perfectionist or whatever, but like to have those like facing perfectly up in the furrows as I plant them.
Cool. Awesome.
My favorite thing about the hardneck garlic, even though I am not going to be growing garlic just because I grow all of my vegetables in containers,
sure,
is that it feels like you get 2 harvests per crop.
Oh, yeah.
In the spring, you get all those hardscapes, which are the flowers, and you're supposed to remove those because it'll actually promote a larger size bulb, and then you can use those within your cooking. And so usually in spring, if I go to the farmer's market, some farmer's going to be selling those garlic scapes, and we use those for cooking or pesto. So I'm all for a crop that gives you 2 harvests.
Mm-hmm.
So
nice. I will also not be growing garlic because I'm a lazy cook. I prefer to buy the pre-minced garlic in the little tube that I can just drop right in. But I'm sure the flavor is way better on something you can grow yourself, though.
I remember the first time I tried at home grown garlic from the farmer's market, and it blew me out of the water. Like I had used too much. I think it was a much stronger flavor than I had been used to from the farmer's market, from the grocery store.
Yeah.
But the flavor was just, amazing. And it just helped transform the food a little bit. So I know you don't want to chop it off, but Candace,
I know.
You go to the farmer's markets all the time. If you buy one this fall, and you'll notice a huge flavor difference. Or buy one for your family for Thanksgiving or something.
Yeah.
Well, definitely different varieties have different flavors. I've noticed that. And I can't say I have a favorite one. I kind of plant, just a variety of stuff each time we do it. But yeah, you can definitely tell there's some that have a lot stronger flavor, a lot milder flavor, depending on what you're into. But definitely agree that the fresh stuff adds a lot better flavor than the kind of muted stuff you get at the grocery store.
Well, I'll have to compare, see how it is. Okay, well, I see the questions coming in, so keep those coming. So before we get to those, let's chat a little bit more about kind of bulbs in general. So we're talking today about spring flowering bulbs, and the idea with the spring flowering bulb, obviously, as the name implies, they flower in the spring, but these type of bulbs require a cold treatment in order for that flower to be initiated, which is why we're talking about them now, because fall is the time to plant these spring flowering bulbs so that they are ready to go for next season. So I know a lot of us, all of us, I think already have some bulbs to get planted. So I grabbed a couple of mine. Mine came in the mail the other day. So I have 1,000 tulip bulbs that I need to get planted in the next couple of weeks. So I've talked about this before. I grow tulips as a cut flower, which is a little bit different than growing a tulip in the landscape. Okay. So anytime you plant a spring flowering bulb, you're typically going to read the package, find out how deep to plant it, what your proper spacing is, all that. And I think Kelly has some myths we can talk about with that too. But as a cut flower, we essentially treat a tulip bulb as an annual. So I'm not going to leave it in the ground to come back year after year. So I actually don't have to worry about spacing as much. So I can take all of these tulip bulbs and then just place them essentially side by side by side. And what I do is fill basically an entire raised bed with 1,000 tulip bulbs and cover them with a couple of inches of composter soil. And then in the spring, I get the reward of all of those coming up. So just a little bit different kind of on the cut flower side of things. And I also am very selective on the varieties. So again, in the landscape, you might choose something different. There are many types of tulips. This is a parrot tulip. So they have a really cool coloration. So I tend to grow parrot types as well as lily flowering types. And you can see they have a cool petal shape. And then also double types of tulips, which have more petals than the typical tulips. They almost look like a peony when they open up, which is really cool. So I don't grow, for cut flower purposes, I don't grow much of just the standard kind of single tulip. I tend to grow kind of more of the unique variety. So that's what I'll be working on over the next month. Because like you talked about with garlic, we typically wait till kind of after that frost date, once the ground has started to cool off a bit. You want to get some roots started on those bulbs, but not enough time that they've started to kind of shoot up much growth. So I know that's a question we commonly get is, okay, when do we actually put these in the ground? So I know I've got a lot of tulips. Ryan, you said you were going to work on some daffodils this fall.
Yeah, I've got about 500 or so daffodils, and nothing special, just kind of the run of the mill yellow. I got a couple, like a white with yellow center, but what I like is the taller, just kind of your traditional daffodil. There's a lot of them that are a little short, 6-inch tall things, and accidentally kind of got some of those and planted them last year. And when they came up in the spring, it's like, oh, those are the short ones. But why we really liked, we used to live in Southern Illinois where there used to be daffodil farms, and there's just all these naturalized daffodils that grow in all the ditches along the country roads in certain counties of Southern Illinois. We just always loved that look. And so that's what we've tried to recreate across the front, the road front of my property. And so this fall, we have a few neighbors that are interested in adding that. So we're hoping to make kind of on our little country road neighborhood along a country road, kind of that naturalized look of daffodils in the ditches. And so you can, in Southern Illinois, I just would not mow that area close to the road that kind of had little daffodils in it for as long as I could stand, and then eventually would mow them off. And I mean, I know probably from, the care recommendations for a lot of these bulbs are probably to not trim that foliage back for, I don't know, what would the recommendation be, like 6 or 8 weeks probably of growth after flowering?
Until it yellows, basically, yeah.
So it's kind of breaking a rule, but they can grow kind of intermixed with turf and whatever's kind of in the ditch area along roads, and so that's the look we're going for. So we like those taller ones that kind of stick up above the grass that may start to grow up, and just kind of randomly planted. We're not putting them in a lot of times folks, do a concentrated area of daffodil, a little patch of it, if you would. We're just kind of going for the random bulbs dispersed throughout and trying to get that look. So
yeah, I love that idea of kind of naturalizing them for sure. Now, how are you going to plant them, Ryan? I meant to grab. I have a bulb planter. It's basically a really big drill bit that you can put on the end of a drill, and then actually use that to drill kind of holes in the ground, and it makes it go a lot faster. Are you going to do anything like that?
Yeah, I'll use a little bulb auger and a drill, And so I guess the only problem I found with that is that you have the tendency to get them pretty deep sometimes. I almost have to force myself to stay a little shallow because it just usually shoots that in there so fast. So I tend to want to have a little bit of backfill with me as I'm doing that. Just, and something as simple as an old 3-gallon pot full of some just random kind of loose, good soil. You don't want anything real clay filled. If you have really clayey soil, I think in some spots I kind of mixed in some wood chippy kind of material, some organic matter kind of stuff to kind of loosen it up in the hole at least, because they aren't going to like real poor drainage. And when you're kind of out in the ditch area along the road, you don't have, not that I'm putting it in where water would flow, but sometimes you just kind of have clay soil from road construction, other stuff. So that's maybe a concern, is having loose enough soil. But I think that's the best. I've also put them in just with a hand trowel. But when you're doing 500 or 1,000, bulbs, it really helps to speed things up. So I do like those little augers.
For sure. Kelly, how about you? We have a question here about containers. Are you going to try any in containers?
Yeah, definitely. I do think that you can grow bulbs in containers, and you can be very successful at them. It really is, we call it kind of lasagna gardening, is what I've done in the past, where I layer the bulbs as the container goes up. I'll put, an allium in the center. It will come up last. I'll put tulips next. They'll come up mid-season, and I'll put an early blooming crocus at the top. But, one of the things when you think about a container, you want to think about root growth, right? So you still want to plant that container and allow for, 6 to 8 weeks of root growth, giving it water, not too much water, but then you need to protect it. I know that sounds bad, but there might not sound bad, but you either need a protected location near your home, or you need to put it in a garage. And if it goes too low, then the bulbs might freeze in that pot. And if it stays too high, then you're not going to get the vernalization. So even though it's a little bit of work, usually, if you can pull it in and out, depending on temperature, but, like a heated garage like Candace has or would be appropriate. I mean, what do you keep your garage at during the winter? I would say like 40, 50 degrees.
Yeah. Until I start. Yeah. Once I starting seeds, then I kind of crank the heat up, but that would be about right.
So it can definitely be done in a container, and they can be really, really, really striking if you put some work into it now, and just allow them to grow those roots in the fall before you put them in that, before you try to vernalize them, which is cold treatment.
Yeah. Cool. Well, hopefully that helps Maureen. Maureen, she said she hadn't had much luck. So hopefully if she try some of those tips, that will help out. Okay, let's see. I think we have a couple other bold questions, so I want to hit those. Mary Kay asks, regarding tulips for arrangements, do you stagger the bulb planting so you get a longer period of blooms? That's a great question, Mary Kay. And no, not so much the planting. It's more about the variety. So like if I look at this double variety here, it says on the box that it is you can't really see because of the camera, but it says double early. So that tells me that this is an early variety. So when I'm ordering my varieties, I'm looking for early varieties. I'm looking for late varieties so that I can stagger that a little bit. And then I know I've talked about this before, but the cool thing about growing tulips as a cut flower is that, and growing them as an annual, is that when I harvest them, I pull the bulb along with it. The flower stays attached to the bulb. And what that does is it leaves the flower's food source attached, and then I can store those for a period of time. So let's say the weather just gets super warm and all of the tulips blow in like one day. They're all ready to go. And I don't want that necessarily. I can harvest them with the bulb attached, put them in the fridge, put them in a cooler, and you can hold them for several more weeks that way. So look for different varieties. That's how you're going to get that too.
And two, another thing, when you think about those pristine, perfect displays that park districts have around town, those bulb plantings are planted every single year.
Yep.
And once they're done with those bulbs, they're done. They throw them in a compost pile.
Yep.
So they're kind of growing them the same way that you do.
Yeah, you're treating them as an annual, because in that type of setting, they don't have time to let the foliage stay there and look crummy. They're going to be coming in with the next season of plants to keep it looking good all season long. And the whole landscape, you can kind of tolerate letting the leaves go yellow and letting them look bad. But yeah, in a landscape like that, they can't do that. Yeah.
Or you could mix them with other spring perennials and perennials that come up in the summer that are going to eventually hide out that foliage. Now, I know that we think that we have to wait this really long time to cut back the foliage, and it has to kind of almost yellow. I don't think you have to wait that long. I mean, I think we say wait till you're yellow just to be safe, because that's, as a botanist, that's when we can tell all the sugars have been transferred to the bulb.
Yeah.
But I do think you can cut back that foliage a little bit earlier than previously thought. And I do think there are some studies out there about cutting back the foliage a little bit earlier than the traditional 6 to 8 weeks. So, I mean, you could be a little bit experimental, but I would at least wait the 4 weeks.
Yeah, just not immediately right after flowering. That's really gonna, You were talking about that, Ryan, earlier with daffodils. I have a lot of mine planted amongst one of my Hosta beds. And a lot of times I'll go through and then I will cut up that foliage later. But this year I didn't. The Hostas are getting big enough at this stage that they just kind of cover them up, and they just melt away eventually later in the season. So it's definitely is great to intermix them throughout your other perennials, I think. Yeah.
Well, I'd say in these naturalized daffodil kind of settings, I'm totally breaking those rules, because it's, I don't know if I can make it till mid-May or something before I mow, but they're getting mowed off once they're done flowering a lot of times. And I just accept the fact that out of those 500 I planted or whatever, some are going to get mowed off and not make it next year, but over the years enough get strong enough that they stick around.
Yeah.
So I'm not looking. Yeah, and I'm not looking for perfection either. It's kind of like this natural. They're just kind of all over the place at random.
Yeah.
So
good point. Let's see a couple other bulb questions. Amy asked, I planted 50 anemones last fall and none of them came up this spring. Any ideas? So if you're talking about the typical anemone, which I will also grow as a cut flower occasionally, if I'll have to look this up 100%, but I'm fairly certain they are not hardy here. Typically with anemones, like a cut flower anemone, you could start them in the fall, but you would need a low tunnel or some type of coverage to keep that temperature up a little bit. What I typically do is get them planted in the spring. So let's say probably March, if I can get out into my raised beds, plant them out there and then create a low tunnel over that. So if you're just planting them straight outside and they've got the full winter kind of force of cold, they are not going to survive that if we're talking about kind of the traditional cut flower anemone. So you might try either wait into the spring or trying some type of kind of low tunnel season extension tool.
And there's also a little tiny anemone that actually blooms in the spring called windflower. That's really quite lovely. Not that fall blooming anemone that you probably have your heart set on, but this is a really lovely flower. So anemone blonda, windflower, or Grecian windflower. So it could be.
Yeah. And then there's also, of course, the perennial Japanese anemone, which you can find in the garden as well, which actually I'd have to look up the species. I don't think that's even an anemone species, I don't think, but I'd have to look. But give that a try and confirm for sure what type of anemone you're growing too. Let's see. Carol asked, can iris bulbs be kept over the winter and planted in the spring? I would say Yeah, I would think an iris rhizome you could dig, keep it cool and dry over the winter, and it would have enough kind of energy left to plant in the spring. Do you guys agree?
Yeah.
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 Yeah, it makes sense.
Yeah.
And then I think iris bulbs have sat around this office.
Yeah. I mean, they're pretty tough. Yeah. I mean, if you have the spot ready and you have them now, I would plant them now. I mean, fall is a great time to plant iris and divide it. But if you don't, I think you'd be fine. Yeah. Okay, let's see. Okay, so we've got some other kind of general gardening questions. So let me scroll back up to some of these. We got an insect question for you here, Kelly. Maureen asked, should I be concerned about the number of grasshoppers on my flowering plants? What do you think about grasshoppers?
Should you be concerned? I don't know. I meant I have had grasshoppers be problems in my annuals and vegetables before. They don't really they're not devastating pests like a squash bug infestation or something. I wouldn't be concerned about them at this point. Definitely. Yeah. I wouldn't be concerned about pretty much any insect pest at this point because they're going to die off soon.
Cold temperatures are on the way. Yeah. Okay, good. Well, hopefully that's helpful. Let's see, tree question here. Laura asked, I very much would like to plant a tamarack tree, which I finally found a source for. Any concerns or thoughts about them before I buy?
Yeah, I don't know if it was a couple of years ago, I wrote an article about tamarack or larch and had a reader reach out to me and I was kind of talking about the native tamarack and larch, that it's barely hardy here was something I said. And he was quick to point out, hey, there's a ton of different cultivars. There's, non-native species that do well here. And I'm talking about central Illinois. But so it just led me to have a little more conversation with this grower. And he's pretty experienced in all of this and has done, probably 20, 30 years of experience in planting different conifers that are ornamental. And I guess his recommendation, I can't back this up with my own personal experience because I can't say I've ever planted a larch definitely not on my own property. I don't even know as an arborist if I ever planted a larch, but one of the things he noted was just that they take a lot of watering through establishment. And by establishment, I mean, when we plant a tree, they're in transplant shock until they become established, until their roots kind of grow out beyond that planting hole and they're able to have a little more of a root network out there to support them. And so that was just his biggest comment and kind of, as we talked about it in a little more detail. So I think that would be my biggest recommendation is just that they're not gonna do well and don't worry if it's not looking great in those first couple of years. As long as you're keeping that watering up, they tend to establish a little bit later than other trees and will do fine once they do. But very cool tree. It's one that I've since then really thought about planting, but I can't say I've ever seen one in a nursery, and I don't, won't say that I went there looking for it necessarily, but it's kind of a rare one to find. Yeah. So definitely a cool one to add to your collection.
Cool. Yeah, she said she finally found a source, so she must have been looking for a while too. Awesome. Okay, let's see. Susan is also a lazy cook. Awesome. She said she freezes peeled cloves and then grates it into her recipes. That's a good idea. I have to try that.
That's a good idea.
Yeah, it's just hard to chop. It's so tiny. Let's see. There's some others here. Okay, Jenny has another tree question. My redbud tree, and she said it's forest pansy, exploded with growth over the summer with lots of low hanging and dropping branches. Or maybe she means drooping. Can I trim it this fall?
I'd probably wait till dormancy. I mean, if it's a newer plant, especially. And when we say prune it, just kind of taking up a little bit of ground clearance. If it's a healthy plant, I don't feel bad doing that just about any time. I mean, maybe not during flowering or, we definitely want to avoid we're moving right into leaf drop. So, that's a kind of a critical time for the plant. So I definitely wouldn't prune it right this minute. I'd wait till the leaves came off. But, if it's just the one or two limbs that are really bugging you and it's a healthy plant, it's not that big of a deal to take a little bit off. But if you're really talking about, a true pruning where you're taking a third of the foliage out of the plant, yeah, it definitely needs to wait till wintertime at this point.
Okay, awesome. Very good. Okay, let's see. Jennifer asked, Ryan, I've toyed with the idea of throwing some flowers in our ditch or roadside as well, but ours stays wet year round. Any suggestions for what to try and grow?
Well, yeah, I mean, I guess I say, the ditch area. I'm really talking more like the ditch bank into like yards, so that's really not in that lower spot. But I don't know if I'd have a recommendation for a bulb in a soggy spot. I mean, I think maybe getting out of the area where water stands and mixing in a little bit of loose fill, if you auger those holes out, might be a way to try and push them to make it. But would either you have a suggestion for a bulb for a soggy spot? I just don't know enough of the different bulb plants.
Wouldn't do bulbs for soggy because that's bulb killer right there.
I think a lot of them I think would just rot if they were in a consistently moist environment. Yeah. So if you're able to go like up the side of the ditch a little bit more, then I think you'd have better success.
It's not a bulb, but our native blue flag iris is kind of a similar plant that does well in poor drainage. I think looks really cool. Has a similar look. So that's maybe another option.
That'd be a good one. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Hopefully that helps.
And then, there's some fescues out there that will take poor drainage. Right. There's some ground covers out there that will do some of that. So
yeah, good options. Okay, let's see. Aaron asked, do you need to cover the tulip bulbs when you plant them with mulch, etc.? So you want to maybe cover the just kind of basic planting procedure. You guys want to touch on that?
Okay, so your general rule of thumb is to plant the bulb two to three times the bulb height. So a bulb is about 2 inches high. Her general rule of thumb is going to plant that 4 to 6 inches deep. That's a lot of digging. However, for Candace, with that bulb auger, that's perfectly fine. Yep. But that goes to one of my bulb myths. Tulip bulbs are kind of an exception to this rule. They only have to be planted 2 inches, which is good for Candace because less work.
Less digging.
She's probably a lazy gardener too at times, even though she gardens more than most people. But so she really only has to plant those 2 inches deep. And that was a study done by Cornell where they actually found that when tulip bulbs were top planted like that, they actually had more flowers. So, sitting here trying to get these tulip bulbs really deep you don't have to do it anymore. Mm-hmm. Another thing is, you think about them, they're forming roots. You still have to give them some water. You have to mulch them and prevent them from being taken up by squirrels. There are some that can be prevented. It seems like squirrels kind of find where they know you've dug, right? Mm-hmm. So that's just some general rules of thumb. One of the myths that I wanted to talk about is this bone meal. Adding bone meal. In the horticulture industry, we've always been told that we need to add bone meal, which is a form of phosphorus that when added is supposed to aid in root growth. And that's really what you want in the fall. You want that root growth. Well, what they found is that this bone meal actually messes with the chemistry of the soil a little bit and prevents that bulb from taking up that phosphorus that it needs. And let's see, so how does it do this? Well, there's already phosphorus in the soil. The plant needs to take it up. That's what you're working for, right? And so what happens with these bulbs is they grow roots. And what a fungus called Mycorrhizae will attach to these roots. And that fungus has a symbiotic relationship. It gets carbohydrates from the bulb, food, and it gives the bulb the ability to take up water and nutrients better. And so when you add that bone meal, you prevent that mycorrhizae from being able to attach to the roots. So if you would have just not added the bone meal, you would have had enough phosphorus uptake to form those roots without bone meal at all. So, we're starting to really think about our soils and what's already in it. And, if you fertilize as a gardener or you add things to your soil as a gardener, you kind of need to know what's going on with your soil, right? So that's why it's not always just great to, you kind of want to know a little bit more of the science of your garden before you just start adding amendments left and right and start really thinking about what we're doing. I really, as a garden culture, think we over fertilize and over amend in a lot.
Yeah. Keep it simple.
Yeah. So like nature is helping you take that phosphorus up. You don't need the bone meal. And so I'm going to, the bone meal industry is probably not liking me. It doesn't mean we don't need my phosphorus at times. It just a soil test would have revealed that I don't have phosphorus in the soil. Then bone meal might have been better despite limiting the mycorrhizal interaction. So I wanted to just show you really quick a picture of mycorrhizae. And this is a fungal pathogen that attaches to the roots. Kelly, how come you have such a cool photo of mycorrhizae? Well, that's because my twin sister is a mycorrhizal scientist for the University of Wisconsin. She's working on how does mycorrhizae affect trees and climate change. So I've constantly said, and I'm sure Ryan and Candace think, we don't know enough about our soil to just dump all these materials everywhere. I guarantee you, Candace doesn't amend her soil unless she knows exactly what she's doing.
Yeah. Again, lazy gardener. I don't need to do more they don't need to do. Yeah.
I think one thing I've learned over the years too is to not ever rely on that kind of synthetic input to, a synthetic fertilizer I guess maybe bone meal is not necessarily synthetically produced, but to rely on those natural soil processes, that biology, all the ecology that's happening there. So like in this case, that fungi has infected this root and caused it to swell and increase its surface area and giving it a better ability to just take up everything from water and nutrients. Other microbes in the soil cycle nutrients. So we don't have to add the phosphorus or the nitrogen or some of the other things. They're actively doing that for us. So simply by adding a large carbon source to the soil, you can, stimulate some of that natural soil biology and get that natural nutrient cycling to happen on its own. So that's usually my goal I'm rarely adding a true fertilizer. I'm usually adding just organic matter in different forms to get to that point of, good soil fertility. So that's, I think, my takeaway is just, you use that biology that's there. And I think there's just tons and tons we don't understand, especially as gardeners, even as, folks that study this, about all that biology that's going on underground. It's hard to see. It's not tangible. It's something we have to, do different ththings to detect and measure and try and figure out. But super interesting. I love hearing about your sister's work too, Kelly. And, that's a big topic in tree care is mycorrhizae and what it can do for tree roots.
And, you'll see it in
discuss that a lot.
lots of soilless media mixes in the industry these days. You'll go, they'll have mycorrhizae added to the mix, and growers like myself, when I was in the industry, we would use this mycorrhizae in the greenhouse industry to help grow products faster, stronger. Because, I would get for my perennial production, I would get my perennials in the late summer, fall months. I would plant them in a mix that contained mycorrhizae. I'd overwinter them, and then I'd force growth in the spring. And I noticed when I added mycorrhizae, I had better growth in the long run. But that's, again, something that needs a lot more research. How do you use this mycorrhizae in the horticulture industry? And how would you encourage it in your own garden? It's probably there. I mean, it's in nature everywhere. Just if you were to go into the forest and get a cup of the soil and add it to your garden, which we're not suggesting at this point because of jumping worm. No. If you were to do that, you'd be adding that natural mycorrhizae from the forest ecosystem.
Well, so in the tree care industry, there's a lot of products being sold with various routes of addition to the soil where you can add mycorrhizae to an urban soil. And, a lot of the thinking is that in urban soils, we've impacted that soil structure. We've changed soil so much. When we build a house, when we build a neighborhood, a road, a building, that those mycorrhizae are gone. And we don't see as high of populations of mycorrhizae on urban tree roots as we would in the forest. So the thinking is, let's add that back in there. But, it still is kind of a question to me. And I've been putting mycorrhizae on tree roots for a couple decades now. It still is a question to me, and a lot of folks in the arboriculture industry have raised this question of how effective is that mycorrhizae application? If we've already created soil conditions that are not supporting mycorrhizae, they would naturally occur if we had the right soil conditions. If you just add them, is that really a true repair to the soil? So I'm usually not just looking to boom add a shot of mycorrhizae. I'm usually looking to kind of improve the soil environment one way or another as we're trying to add that and trying to recreate, a healthier soil overall. So, it's just a big aspect in tree care, especially mature trees that are ailing. What can we do to improve that soil environment? And there's a million things beyond adding mycorrhizae, but I also always kind of put that caveat in when we talk about it in terms of tree care. You need to do other things other than just add the mycorrhizae if you want to expect to get a real outcome out of it for an entire mature tree root system.
Mm-hmm. And Kelly, you can stop sharing if you want to.
I thought I did.
As good as a pic. There you go. As good as a picture that is.
I thought I stopped sharing.
Awesome. Okay, let me see where we're at with questions. I know we've got a couple others here. Let's see. Liz asked, what can I plant with irises that will bloom when the irises finish blooming? The iris leaves don't appear to die down, and I'd like to plant something with them that blooms in the summer. Yeah, you're 100% right, Liz. I love iris, and I'll specifically bearded iris. It's a beautiful flower. Great. It's a great cut flower too. But man, is the season short. And then after that, they're just kind of like the foliage is not that great. So you're right. I think mixing it in amongst perennial beds is the way to go. So one of the beds I can think of that I have mine in, I've got catmint in there that's really going to kind of fill out foliage around it. I've got some baptisia behind it that would kind of give some height. There's some alliums mixed in there. What else? Can you guys think of anything else?
I feel like you have ladies' mantle in there.
Yeah.
You really go to her house.
Right. What all do I have in that bed?
You have ladies' mantle in that bed that is an awesome spring cover up.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Honestly, I think anything you could plant around it that's going to have a nice looking foliage, I think is good. Because like I said, to me, after the flowers are done, you're left with the foliage, and it's not that great. And it doesn't take up that much space. So it's easy to kind of intermix throughout your other perennials, I think.
It's kind of like the Siberian one.
Me too.
The kind of the linear foliage. It's neat and organized, even though I don't love neat and organized. It is neat and organized.
I'm with you.
And in the spring, it looks like swords.
Yeah, I would never plant an entire bed just of, let's say, like a bearded iris, because you're going to get a good couple weeks off of that. And then the rest of the season's like, well, here it is. There's not much to look at.
That's what I think about daylilies.
Well, and I was gonna say that you could put daylilies with it too, but I don't want to promote daylilies out there. No, the daylily foliage would also kind of cover things up too, if you really liked it.
But then what's going to cover up the ugly daylily foliage? I don't know.
Right.
I think Catmint is way better.
I think so too. Yep. Let's see. We got a question over on YouTube. I've got a middle schooler that has said he's been wanting to do gardening. What would be easy things to start with, or maybe the best things to do to get started? So gardening with a middle schooler. What would you say?
Yeah, I would do some container gardening personally. I've been doing those gardening in the bags or getting some little, bowls or some containers, and I would grow radish, I would grow lettuces or spinach and have them, water those germinating seeds every day and then have them watch it grow. You could even have them measure as they go or have them make observations. I love radish because it's 4 to 5 weeks and you have radish to feed your kids. I love the leafy greens too. Yeah, I would, or even do some houseplants in the classroom. Go get you a good LED light and, look at our houseplant blog, our favorite houseplants. Get some houseplants. There's some great ones. ZZ plant would be awesome. Have them take care of that.
I think it's really fun to do cuttings with houseplants. To do a cutting and kind of let it, like say a spider plant, and watch it root in some water, and then plant it and watch it grow. I found with my kids aren't quite middle school yet, but it is not the weeding, the mulching, like those kind of things are not at all what they get into. I got them a little wheelbarrow thinking the mulching might be kind of fun, moving stuff around. But it's like Kelly said, like planting a container, there's not a lot of weeding that goes into that container. Then later they can kind of get a fun experience out of that. Planting annuals, like putting little tomato plants are kind of fragile, but even annual flowers and things, some stuff that's kind of tough that they can get put in the soil and see that plant get planted, I think is great. And I guess another one that I've seen kids enjoy is kind of dividing stuff. And it's hard sometimes to get a shovel in and do the division part. Sometimes there's things they can kind of pull apart with their hands, but taking that clump of plants and then spreading it out in another spot and creating new, and they see that then grow back over the season is cool too. So I think those active things that are fun, like planting or creating new things, I think is what kind of holds kids' attention.
Yeah, plant some easy flower seeds like zinnias or marigolds or cosmos. Yeah, but I think you're right. I think the easy vegetables and containers, stuff like that would be a great place to start. Yeah.
Or couldn't they even plant bulbs?
Oh, yeah.
We could just plant some daffodils.
Yeah, you want to start right now. Get outside, plant some bulbs, and then in the spring, there you go.
And then the aged kids go, hey, you guys planted that. And then they go over there and make some observations. Especially, I'm a big fan of spring bulbs because they're a really amazing early source of nectar and pollen for bees at a time when there's not a lot around. I think most people don't realize that a lot of Illinois bees come out in the spring and have completed their life cycle before, our zinnias start blooming. So we really need those early sources of nectar and pollen. I usually don't mow my lawn, getting rid of the violets or the dandelions until I start seeing spring blooming trees. And so if you were to plant those snowdrops and the crocuses and the blue cilias, you're going to be feeding bees. One of those bees are going to be, an overwintering queen bumblebee who's overwintered in a little crevice in your garden. And she really needs some nectar and pollen because she needs to start building her colony up. There's other spring nesting bees like a mason bee who now comes out in the spring, needs to gather nectar to feed itself, but needs to gather the larva to feed its young and larva. Candace knew it needs to gather the pollen to feed the larva. So, one of the things that I would love for gardeners to start doing is start thinking more seasonal. Because I think what was happening is we're missing out on some of those really early seasonal bloomers and some of those really late seasonal bloomers. So adding spring bulbs, you are a pollinator gardener, you need to add spring bulbs because these are amazing. Like I said, your crocuses. And then Candace, I know we're kind of running out of time, but can I show one more let me go here.
Totally. We've got about 10, okay. And I'll tell people we've got about 10 minutes left. So if you have any final questions, get them in the comments. Yeah.
Ryan's, this native plant person, and then the person. And so, do we have any native bulbs? Yes, we do. It's called Camassia. Now, Candace and I think it's not the most well-known bulb. It's not like something we learned in school. We were introduced to it at Missouri Botanical Garden where they had this huge, beautiful set. Do you remember that, Candace?
I don't. And you know what? Stop. I'm not seeing your screen share. Are you, Ryan?
No, I can't actually. I can see a.
Try sharing again. See if that picture will come up.
Coming up?
Not yet.
Well,
yeah, for some reason it's just your black screen. I don't know why it won't go.
Yeah, there was a delay before that it took it just a minute, but I don't know.
But you can still talk about it. It's a cool plant.
Let's see here. Can you see that?
Nice.
No, we're still not seeing it.
Okay. Well, I'll just keep talking. Camassia. It's this really cool bulb. It's kind of an old-fashioned bulb. They call it wild hyacinth. And it actually was grown by Indians. And they actually used to use the tubers as food. And if you don't properly prepare them, they actually make you have intense gastronomical problems. So
hit stop share, Kelly, because it's still showing that black screen.
Okay. So
there you go.
What is happening? So this Camassia, it's native to North America, more like the Pacific Northwest. And they have these beautiful bloom, white cream blooms in June. They have a rich history. Actually, in the past, people say they resemble, fields of them resemble lakes of fine, clear water. They are amazing for pollinators. They bloom in April and May. They colonize. They're amazing for cut flowers, long blooming time, and deer resistant. So if you are one of those native plant enthusiasts, Camassia would be a wonderful bulb for you to add. And maybe we'll make sure Ryan gets some of those bulbs next year. He's probably not going to be able to go to the industry and just find a Camassia bulb. Yeah. Candace, would you agree?
Yeah, I don't know. I've seen him anywhere. Yeah.
So we ordered some this year for some of our projects. I wish I would have kept a couple, but that would be a great another addition for Ryan to try. Next year, have him buy some Camassia bulbs and share those with his neighbors.
Yeah, love it.
Cool. It looks like somebody put a link in too, and Sandra said she happily found some in her native garden this year. So that's awesome. Woohoo. Okay, we've got about 5 minutes left. I think we've got at least one more question in here. Beth asks, is there a treatment for Hosta? She says HVX, which I'm assuming she's talking about Hosta virus X. And unfortunately, no, with any virus, no matter what plant it is, there is no cure for a virus once a plant has a virus. The only cure is to dig it up and dispose of it in hopes of it not spreading to other plants in your garden, unfortunately. I know that's a tough one, but.
And I would definitely get it removed.
Yep.
Quickly.
Yeah. Yep. Before it can spread to the others.
So do you want to know some fun pumpkin facts to discuss with your family this weekend?
Yeah, let's finish it off with that.
Okay. When it comes to Illinois pumpkin production, who is number one?
You mean what
Like
county?
what county?
Or
What did I say? Illinois? Oh yeah, Illinois is number one.
I was gonna say like, yeah, Illinois, but
Illinois outcompetes everybody else, even California, which is the second ranked. We almost double their production. There's other pumpkin producers are Ohio, Pennsylvania, Indiana, Michigan, and Virginia. Most likely an Illinois person grew both that pumpkin that you're going to create into a jack-o'-lantern and those pie pumpkins that come from a can. About 80% of our pumpkins go in to make those pie pumpkin cans.
And they look nothing like a jack-o'-lantern. They are not orange.
Pumpkins can range in size from less than a pound to over 1,000. The potential size of growing is the variety you grow and the growing conditions, right? We have great growing conditions. We're going to have big pumpkins. The largest pumpkin is 2,708 pounds.
That's crazy.
It was produced in Europe.
That's crazy.
That is like almost weighs more than my car. Maybe Ryan's car. Ryan's got a little smaller car than Candace and I, so maybe it's heavier than Ryan's car. Now, this was a cool thing. The most pumpkins smashed in 1 minute is 52. 52 pumpkin smashes. That happened in California in 2020.
So was that a trick or a treat then? I guess that would have been the trick.
Actually, there's in 2019, Cook County did this collection of pumpkins after the Halloween season, and they collected 3.17 tons of pumpkins to compost it.
Nice.
And the largest pumpkin pie ever made was over 5 feet in diameter and weighed over 350 pounds.
That's
now,
big.
Who loves pumpkin?
I love pumpkin. Yeah.
Oh, me too.
Yeah.
I think pumpkin pie is my favorite pie. So I could go for that big giant pumpkin pie.
Mm-hmm.
That 350 pound, that's like 4 Ryans, 3 Ryans.
Well, and let's leave it on one question. And I hear this question a lot. So obviously pumpkins are a big decoration for folks on the front porch or wherever. How do you keep your pumpkins lasting as long as possible? What would you guys, do you have any tips? What would you share? I see this on the Instagrams all of the time.
Well, if it's not a jack-o'-lantern pumpkin, I just try and like keep them out of moisture. You know, if you put them on your front step, like get them into your overhang, I feel like helps.
Mm-hmm.
But gosh, once they're carved into a jack-o'-lantern, I don't know. I've never had a good way
No.
to keep that.
Yeah.
I usually don't carve them. Every time I've ever carved them, I've like come back and a squirrel has taken like some bites out of them. And then you see he's acting weird over in the side yard, acting suspicious. You know what I'm talking about. So not sure. I mean, maybe if you didn't do the cutting of the jack-o'-lantern and you decorated the pumpkin, that would be a better alternative. And I do think that's kind of trending, right? It's not just the jack-o'-lantern, like,
No, I think it's the assortment of different colors and sizes and
painting, there was this big, huge trend last year of these botanically inspired jack-o'-lanterns where seed heads were used as eyes and flower petals as teeth or something. It was super cute.
Yeah. And the cool thing about Cook County collecting all of those for compost, what we would not want to do would be to cover them with polyurethane or other things to preserve them. We see that sometimes. And if you think about squirrels and the other wildlife that might feed on those, that's probably not the best route to go if you're going to put them outside. Yeah. We get that question.
I mean, when it comes to kids and knives, I mean, I'm not the biggest fan.
Right.
I'd rather do a black magic marker.
Just let them enjoy them.
But, I know that people are really into the pumpkin seeds too. So harvesting and cooking, there's some really great recipes for U of I extension on pumpkin seeds. So that would
that's a good point. Use it all.
Yep.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys for all of the great questions today. We really got a lot of them today, which is awesome. We will be back in a couple weeks on October 28th. This will be our third or our fourth spooky wicked plant episode. So if you watched our show in the past, usually there's some dress up involved and some props and some fun plants to talk about. So join us on the 28th for that fun show. And then don't forget, there's also our University of Illinois Extension Horticulture Facebook group. So if you have questions in between shows, that's a great place to put your questions and just learn what other gardeners are doing across the state. So thanks everybody for joining us. We will see you next time. Bye everybody.
See ya.